My brother ruined my life by fabricating evidence of my affairs, but after 6 years, the truth finally came out. My high school love, Rachel, was 45 years old and I, a 45-year-old guy, was her spouse. Together, we have 4 daughters. Ashley, 18, Olivia, 21, Madison, 22, and Lauren, 24. We fell in love when we were both 14 years old during our freshman year. I can still clearly recall our English class when I first met her. I assisted her in picking up the books she had dropped. It was our reality, but it seemed like something from an adolescent film. From the first time they laid eyes on Rachel, my parents, Robert, 68, and Pamela, 66, fell in love. She was their unborn daughter. Mom would teach her our family dishes and invite her over for Sunday dinners even when they were first dating. Dad gave us relationship advice all the time and treated her like his own daughter. He would say things like, "Think before making big decisions and communication is key." Our relationship was shaped by those statements for many years. This parting is made much more agonizing by the unique memories that each of my girls has. Our oldest, Lauren, was my shadow when she was younger. In the park close to our house, I spent numerous weekends teaching her how to ride a bike. Like the older children, she was determined to learn without the use of training wheels. Her delighted smile brightened the entire neighborhood when she eventually succeeded. As she had envisioned, she is now a prosperous lawyer. When Madison, our artistic soul, was 15, she converted our garage into her art studio. I constructed an easel and arranged her materials to assist her in setting it up. That area became her haven after we transformed it over the course of a summer. Our living room is adorned with a family portrait that she painted. It was her first significant composition. If it's still there, I wonder. The best part of my weekends was watching Olivia play soccer. Until I had to miss them all, I never missed a single one. When my mother contacted me at work to tell me that I had made the varsity team as a freshman, I could still hear her happy voice. She learned how to play from me, and we practiced penalty kicks in the backyard for hours. At games, she constantly claimed that I was her fortunate charm. My tiny coding partner was Ashley, my tech-savvy youngest child. When she was 10 years old, we worked together to build her first computer. We would work on basic games late into the night since she was so eager to learn programming. She came up with the concept for an app that would use puzzles to teach children math. When everything collapsed, we were halfway through the development process. Our first few years of marriage were both magical and difficult. During our senior year, we were both pleased and afraid to learn that Rachel was expecting Lauren. I chose to work at a nearby manufacturing company while attending night classes rather than enrolling in college right away. While raising Lauren, Rachel worked part-time to complete her degree. Despite barely making ends meet and living in a small one-bedroom apartment, we were content. We learned collaboration and resilience over those years. But my 43-year-old younger brother James was always a specter over our joy. I was too trusting to notice the signs properly, but they were there from the start. James would make excuses to be around us even in high school. He would offer to drop Rachel off at our favorite cafe on date nights or offer to drive her home while I had basketball practice. I now understand that James had a pattern of compulsive behavior. He followed his middle school teacher to the grocery store and sent her letters since he was obsessed with her before Rachel. It was dismissed by our parents as a harmless crush. He developed an obsession with a girl in his high school class, making up intricate tales about their connection when they had hardly spoken. It was written off as a teenage drama once more. When Rachel and I got engaged, it was the first big warning sign. James became furious rather than merely disapproving. When he arrived at Rachel's place of employment, he created a commotion that nearly cost her her job. He was yelling that I had taken her away from him and that they were destined to be together. Rachel was afraid. She told me everything right away, and that's when I started thinking about severing my relationship with James. However, my parents stepped in. They persuaded us that James needed assistance rather than rejection. We attended family therapy sessions for months. James expressed regret, claimed to have changed and seemed to accept our relationship. Although I now question whether it was all part of his long-term plan, he even gave a heartfelt speech during our wedding. James became more and more involved in our life over time. He positioned himself as our children's favorite uncle, helped me land a job at his company, and started showing up at family get-togethers all the time. He was especially close to Madison and Lauren, frequently bringing them out and purchasing them pricey presents. I assumed he was simply making amends for his previous actions by being a good uncle. In hindsight, I can see how he methodically gained the trust of each member of my family. He supported Rachel's professional networking, helped my parents with their money, and was always ready to provide a helping hand. In contrast to my hectic schedule and frequent business travels, he positioned himself as the dependable, stable sibling. I needed the business travels to advance in my job, but James took advantage of me. Some of the things he would say to Rachel were, "Mike's always away, but I'm here if you need anything." While I was away, he offered to assist with school functions and home repairs. I was appreciative of his assistance at the moment. I can now understand that it was all a part of his deception. Everything broke apart 6 years ago. I had been at our company's West Coast office for a week on business. It was a presentation for a big project that might get you promoted. I missed Rachel and the girls so much that I contacted her every night to tell her everything that had happened during the day. I also participated in video conferences with the girls, listening to Madison's most recent art project ideas and providing remote assistance with Ashley's math assignments. My whole family was in our living room when I got home. James was there, appearing serious, while Rachel and the girls were crying. Tension was pervasive in the air. Rachel exclaimed, "How could you do this to us?" with a look of fury in her eyes that I will never forget. James had meticulously planned his attack. He pulled out a folder that seemed to be unquestionable proof of my adultery. Intimate text exchanges, hotel receipts, and even pictures of me entering a hotel with another woman were all there. He asserted that the woman was a coworker who, feeling guilty, had told him everything. The images were modified with skill. Later, I found out that they were staged to appear suspicious and were taken at official business meetings. Although the texts were entirely false, they contained information about my travel and work schedule that could only have been known by someone with insider knowledge. James had made things appear genuine by using his position at our organization. I made a valiant effort to protect myself, but long before I entered that room, James had turned everyone against me. He had been subtly hinting at my odd behavior to Rachel for weeks. My daughters had been persuaded by him that I was behaving differently. He had even expressed his concern about my decisions to my parents. I'm still troubled by the nightmare of the next several hours. Lauren, who had always been my strongest supporter, yelled that she would never forgive me and hurled her house key at me. Even though Madison was crying so much that she was having trouble speaking, her words, "I hate you," were audible. My daughter Olivia, who used to race to me after every soccer match, was unable to even look at me. "Why did Daddy do this to us?" Ashley, who was only 12 at the time, turned to Rachel and questioned. The most agonizing response was probably from my parents. Dad, who had taught me everything I needed to know to be a decent spouse and father, and who had always been proud of me, looked at me with utter disgust. His statement, "No son of mine would do this to his family," is still ringing in my mind. You would end this divorce quickly and amicably if you still had any dignity. That evening, I was expelled with only a bag of clothing. In the weeks that followed, I made frantic efforts to establish my innocence. I spent almost all of my savings on hiring 3 different private investigators. After weeks of searching for the supposed other woman, the first private investigator found that she had moved to a different state. Despite identifying several discrepancies, the second investigator was unable to demonstrate that the hotel invoices were fakes. In fact, the third PI nearly discovered James's manipulation before abruptly and mysteriously abandoning the case. James had threatened his family. I found out later. The divorce process was harsh and swift. Rachel was furious and distraught and didn't want to interact with me. My daughters blocked my social media accounts and phone number. I only made contact through attorneys. I lost everything in 6 months, including my work, most of my friends, my home, and my family. At the office, James had been deliberately spreading accusations that I had a history of having inappropriate connections with coworkers. The stigma followed me, and clients began asking not to work with me, even though nothing was formal. I started again after moving to a little apartment across town. The isolation was debilitating. Sometimes all I wanted was a glimpse of my girls, so I would sit in my car outside my former home. Every milestone I missed was like a stab to my heart. I couldn't get close, so I watched Lauren's law school graduation from the parking lot. I sent Madison an anonymous purchase of her favorite piece from her first art show. I cheered alone in my flat while watching Olivia's college soccer championships on the internet. I learned about Ashley's successes in the science fair from the local newspaper. However, nothing could have prepared me for Lauren's wedding's agony. Through a social media post from a common acquaintance, I became aware of it. I lost my role in my moment when I saw James escorting my daughter down the aisle in the pictures. I was in a dark place all day thinking about things I'm not proud of. At that point, I picked up my cat, Max, from the neighborhood shelter. To be honest, he saved my life more than once, and he needed someone just as much as I did. My only means of escape became work. I shifted departments, switched companies, and threw myself fully into my job. I received 2 promotions, but without my family to celebrate with, accomplishment felt meaningless. My background was unknown to the new employer, Yet I was never able to build strong bonds with my coworkers. How do you justify not talking about your family, eating lunch by yourself, or going to office parties? Over the years, I made a few unsuccessful attempts at dating. I was never sure how to respond to the first question, which was always about family. How can you explain to someone that your children despise you, that your brother methodically ruined your life, and that your whole family thinks you're a cheater? Most first dates ended without a second date. Every holiday served as a reminder of my losses. Thanksgiving meant consuming just microwave meals. Christmas was spent drinking too much and viewing old home videos. My girls' and my own birthdays were the worst. Because I couldn't stand to see the unopened presents in my apartment, I continued to buy them presents each year and kept them in a storage unit. Then everything changed 3 days ago. An unidentified number called me. My mother was crying. Although she refused to provide anything over the phone, she said that they had learned the truth about James's deceit. She pleaded with me to meet with them, stating that everyone wanted to make amends and was remorseful. Feeling numb, I hung up. 6 years of loneliness, suffering, and memories lost. My daughters spent 6 years growing up without their father. James lived the life he had stolen from me for 6 years. That cannot be resolved by a simple apology. I've made touch with a legal practice that focuses on defamation and family law disputes. The attorney thinks we may have a good case, particularly if my family now has proof of James's dishonesty. Reconciliation is not something I'm interested in. Justice is what I desire. I want James to be held legally responsible for ruining my life. Some may believe that my family should forgive me because I'm being too harsh. James didn't simply betray my confidence, though. My whole life was methodically ruined by him. He poisoned my girls against me, took away my fatherly position, and robbed me of years I will never get back. How can you forgive someone who denied you the opportunity to watch your kids grow up? Who caused you to miss the wedding of your daughter? Who deliberately and methodically turned your whole family against you? I'm meeting with the attorneys tomorrow to go over our alternatives. My mom asked for a meeting, but I haven't replied yet. Although I have mixed feelings about it, I would like to know how they found the truth. The harm has been done. I'll provide an update as soon as I learn more. I have to prioritize the legal issues and preserve my own emotional well-being throughout this time. Update 1. My parents just presented me with startling proof at my meeting with my legal team. These are the events of the past 2 days. It was eye-opening to meet with my lawyers. They clarified that based on the information my parents gave, James might be charged with several crimes. My mother gave me a big folder with the original, unaltered pictures, which make it obvious how James altered them. Along with bank statements demonstrating payments for fabricating hotel receipts, they also found email exchanges between James and a professional photo editing firm. During a drunken confrontation with Rachel last week, the truth was revealed in a surprising way. By declaring he didn't design all of this simply to lose her, James unintentionally made a mistake. Rachel began investigating after reading this message and discovered a hidden email account on their shared computer. Everything was in the emails. Correspondence with several individuals he hired to assist him. Complete records of his 6-year plan to ruin my life, and even early drafts of the fictitious texts he wrote. Significant progress has been made in the police investigation. James's co-conspirators, including the friend who assisted in making fictitious hotel reservations and the photo editor, have previously been interviewed. By testifying against James, these people are now assisting the authorities in the hopes of avoiding being charged themselves. James's scrupulous record-keeping is especially unsettling. On his laptop, Rachel found a password-protected journal, which she gave to my lawyers. He started planning even before my marriage to Rachel, according to the journal. He spent a lot of time writing about waiting for the right time to carry out his plan. After learning that James intimidated other co-workers and utilized resources to falsify proof in order to support his lies, my former company opened an internal inquiry. Compensation for wrongful firing is being seriously discussed, and the HR department is getting ready to issue a formal apology. The evidence is growing. Experts in forensics discovered erased documents that demonstrated he had attempted similar schemes twice previously but had not carried them out correctly. The degree of forethought is astounding. Rachel is completely assisting investigators and has filed for divorce from James. The worst thing has been discovering how he took advantage of my daughters. His journal entries describe how he poisoned them against me in a methodical manner. He would deliberately sow doubts, misrepresent my statements, and fabricate circumstances to cast me in a negative light. One of Ashley's pals was even paid by him to say they had seen me with another woman. More evidence was found during today's police search on James's office. They discovered USB disks with backup copies of his falsified evidence, several burner phones, and more counterfeit documents he hadn't yet utilized. In order to keep up his network of falsehoods, they also found a list of the persons he was blackmailing. Considering the severity and length of his offenses, my attorneys are certain that they will seek the harshest punishments possible. According to them, James might be sentenced to up to 15 years in prison and could be awarded millions of dollars in civil damages. They have recommended me to forego all communication with my family for the time being, stating that everything must go through the appropriate legal procedures. Another victim has been identified during the investigation. James planned a similar plot against his college roommate and the roommate's girlfriend 20 years earlier. This former victim got in touch with my attorneys to tell his experience after learning about my case. I'm continuing to concentrate on the court case rather than any possible family reconciliation. We're filing the civil complaint tomorrow, and the grand jury hearing is next week. Now, it's important to make sure James bears the full repercussions of his conduct. When there are noteworthy developments in the court case, I'll provide an update. Update 2, the legal process is moving more quickly than anticipated. I need to share a few significant changes that have happened since my last report. James was taken into custody at his place of employment yesterday morning. He was overheard making calls about erasing evidence, which an employee immediately reported to the police and the company's security. He attempted to remove files from his work computer as he was being arrested, but everything had already been secured by the IT department. His response to being caught was telling. He remarked, "She was supposed to be mine anyway," without refuting anything. Today, the grand jury indictment was delivered. They returned their decision in less than 2 hours since the evidence was so strong. In her 20 years of experience, the prosecutor described it as one of the most blatant instances of planned hatred she has ever witnessed. James's actual character eventually came to light during police questioning. He sobbed uncontrollably and disclosed more information about his obsession. He had apparently been surreptitiously filming Rachel for years, gathering thousands of hours of video from covert cameras in their home. This is being handled by the police as a distinct criminal surveillance case. An even more alarming discovery came from the company's internal investigation. James had been embezzling money to finance his plan. He created fictitious vendor accounts and had been embezzling money for years to cover the costs of the different individuals he employed to assist in fabricating the evidence against me. Separate charges are now being pressed by the firm. There have been conflicting responses from my daughter to these disclosures. Lauren has been going over all the evidence because she is a lawyer. We spoke directly for the first time in 6 years when she called me today. At first, she was unable to talk through her emotions. When she was able to speak, she described how James had played on everyone's anxieties and vulnerabilities in a unique way. James had offered to help sell some of her artwork, but Madison found that it was actually stashed away in a storage facility he rented. To keep her financially reliant on him, he had been taking her work and lying to her about it. She is pursuing separate theft accusations. Olivia discovered tapes of James paying her college soccer coach to bench her during crucial matches that I might have attended. He wanted to make sure that I couldn't use sports to get back in touch with her. The NCAA is currently investigating the matter on its own. Ashley's admission was the most devastating. She discovered journal entries in which James described how, prior to everything collapsing, he purposely ruined the coding project we were working on. Knowing how important that shared interest was to our relationship, he had paid someone to hack and contaminate our work. Additional evidence has been discovered during Rachel's divorce procedures. He had been concealing substantial assets, including real estate bought under false pretenses, according to their joint tax forms. Even before our divorce, the forensic accountants were able to track down money transactions to offshore accounts. The extent of James's deceit has crushed my parents. When Dad found out about the concealed cameras in their home, he also suffered a little heart attack. James had been watching every member of the family, gathering information that he could use to control them. He kept records on everyone's vulnerabilities, secrets, and intimate moments. Today, the report from the criminal psychologist was made public. According to the report, James has one of the worst cases of obsessive personality disorder and psychopathic tendencies they have ever seen. According to his notebooks, he carefully planned every aspect of the devastation of my life, viewing it as an art form. Victims from the past have kept coming forward. Similar methods from James's background have been reported by 2 other families, though they are not as complex as what he did to me. These incidents, which date back to his time in college, demonstrate a distinct pattern of worsening conduct. Given the evidence that James had established a tiny network of blackmailed people who assisted him in maintaining his deceit, the prosecutor is now attempting to bring additional organized crime charges against James. Some were people he had financially compromised, and others were other professionals he had snuck on. I've kept my distance from efforts at family reconciliation in favor of assisting in the development of the most compelling legal argument. My attorneys claim that with the overwhelming amount of evidence, James's conviction is all but certain. Now their attention is on making sure he gets the harshest punishment imaginable. Although the tale has garnered media interest, I have turned down every invitation to be interviewed. I'm still focused on pursuing justice within the judicial system rather than going public. Nevertheless, a number of James's accomplices have begun speaking with reporters, exposing the entire scope of his network of deception. Next week, following the preliminary hearing, I'll provide another update. I'm currently preparing for what is expected to be a historic case in criminal justice and family law with my legal team. The conclusions of the preliminary hearing are more important than anyone could have predicted. I wanted to hold off on sharing this update until everything was finalized. Although James entered a guilty plea to all charges, the events in the courtroom were surprising. Against the advice of his attorney, he insisted on making a public statement. He described his entire plan for 45 minutes, not with regret but with a sickening sense of pride. He expressed no remorse, calling it his masterpiece of revenge. The judge's response was extraordinary. She disregarded the usual sentence criteria after hearing James's statement, pointing to his pathological pride and obvious determination to commit another crime. In order to run each count consecutively rather than concurrently, she imposed the maximum penalty. James will be imprisoned for 25 years with no chance of release for 18 of those years. James provided fresh details about additional victims throughout his statement, going beyond the incidents we were already aware of. In other states, he had tried similar tactics against 3 other families. His crimes may result in federal prosecution, according to the FBI's interstate investigation. His offshore accounts were the most startling discovery. He had been operating a consulting business for other compulsive people, teaching them how to ruin relationships and families, the forensic accountants found out. He had customers in several different nations. Now, Interpol is involved. In her testimony, Rachel described discovering a secret chamber in their basement that was stocked with monitors and monitoring gear. In addition to monitoring their home, he had set up cameras in my office, apartment, and even my vehicle. It was military-grade surveillance technology, according to the technical expert who inspected the arrangement. Ashley, my youngest daughter, made significant progress in her analysis of James's computer systems. She discovered encrypted files using her coding expertise, demonstrating that he had been preparing to grow his scam. He had meticulous records on the families of my co-workers, ready to ruin several relationships at once if I ever came close to establishing my innocence. The company's security mechanisms were completely redesigned as a result of their analysis. They found that James had used persuasion and extortion to undermine almost every department. In his own testimony, the CEO described discovering proof that James had been selling company secrets to finance his complex schemes. As an attorney, Lauren has been assisting the prosecution in constructing cases for James's other victims. She discovered a trend that went all the way back to his high school years. He had spent more than 25 years honing his craft. He had developed a network of enablers during his life, according to her inquiry. Betrayal Shadow, an exhibition at Madison's Art Gallery, showcased pieces she produced while dealing with this experience. She openly challenged a number of James's collaborators who were there at the event without their knowledge. Video recordings of their confessions served as proof for further charges. Olivia found out that James had been following her college friends, gathering damaging material to keep them quiet. She is currently developing procedures to stop similar manipulation schemes in college athletics by collaborating with school security across the country. Our family's psychological effects have resulted in an unforeseen development. Numerous prestigious colleges are examining the case as an illustration of persistent psychological manipulation. In order to improve detection and prevention tactics for incidents like this one, research teams are examining James's techniques. A support group for families impacted by pathological liars and manipulators has been established by my parents. They have discovered 5 further instances of James interfering in the lives of other families, some of which go back decades, thanks to this network. Due to these disclosures, a number of cold cases involving questionable family splits have been reopened. The judge combined compensatory and punitive penalties and sentenced James to pay $12 million in reparations. The forensic accountants discovered that he had accumulated more than $20 million from corporate espionage and consulting, all of which have been confiscated. In the future, I have turned down every attempt at reconciliation from my relatives. The years lost are irreparable, and the damage is too great. I'm concentrating on assisting in the construction of safeguards to stop similar exploitation from happening to others. James's law is now being considered by a number of state legislatures to strengthen the penalty for planned family destruction. I keep my anonymity intact, even though the story has garnered international attention. Rather, I'm developing tools to identify patterns of systematic familial manipulation in collaboration with cybersecurity professionals. Leading the technical development, Ashley is transforming our misery into something that could potentially benefit others. My last update will be this one. Although justice has been done, some wounds never completely go away. I'm going about my life with the intention of keeping others from going through what James did to our family. I departed to start my own business in spite of my parents' opposition. They then tried to take my money and filed a lawsuit against me. I was never liked by my parents. They went to the same college and were infatuated in high school. When my mother found out she was pregnant while still in college, their ambitious intentions to tour the world and see other cultures were dashed. Although they thought about ending the pregnancy, their parents forbade it. My mother eventually left college and moved in with her parents because she was unable to cope with the criticism and rumors from other people. I entered the world in this manner. My grandparents loved me, but my mother hated me. My mother never spent time with me, so for a long time I thought she was my sister and my grandparents were my parents. When I tried to get her attention, she would either yell at me or ignore me. I was unaware of my father's existence because he was not present. During this period, my parents kept dating. I know they didn't want a kid, but I didn't understand why they detested me as a kid. Both of my grandparents were friendly to me, spent time with me, and watched after me. By the time of my father's college graduation, I was beginning to walk and speak. He started coming to see me every weekend because he felt bad about not being more active in my life. I assumed he was merely my grandparents' buddy. My grandparents urged him to get to know me, but my mother detested it when he spent time with me and insisted that he ignore me. That's how I found out he was my dad. He moved in with my mother after proposing to her when he acquired a job. My mother was fiercely opposed to my father's desire for me to live with them so they could care for me. As they became older, my grandparents wanted my parents to assume the role. I moved in with my parents when I was 5 years old after they reluctantly took me in. It would be an understatement to say that I detested living with my parents. It seemed as though darkness had taken the place of the light in my existence. My mother threatened to expel me if I did anything wrong and was always reminding me to be thankful that I was still living with them. My dad arrived home late at night after working all day. He insisted that I go to bed since he couldn't handle me that day and that he needed time alone whenever I wanted to spend time with him. My grandparents used to love me, but now I live with parents who hate me. I knew I wasn't wanted, but I didn't know why. Unlike other children, I never received toys or treats from my parents. On occasion, I would arrive at school with unfinished assignments, and my instructor would call my mother to yell at me for being indolent and to accept responsibility. Because I was so afraid of her, I began to meticulously complete my assignments in the hopes that one day she would accept me. However, she never did. My father continued to live in his own universe, unconcerned with my everyday activities or academic achievement. As I became older, I realized the true feelings my parents had for me. I observed that they regarded me differently than other children. I observed other parents embracing, kissing, and grinning as they dropped off their kids. None of that ever happened to me. I had the impression that I was living with strangers. I began to wonder if I was actually their biological child as a result. I asked my grandparents every time I went to see them and they confirmed that I was their child. They clarified that my parents simply required more time to grow up. My mother, on the other hand, never sat down to say anything nasty. If I were in high school with you, I would have bullied you mercilessly. It was strange to hear my mother make fun of my hair, glasses, and weight. My mother refused to acknowledge that I had a milk allergy, even though my grandparents were well aware of it. She made me drink milk one day, saying that children in her era didn't have allergies and that I was pretending to have one to be cool. I ended up in the hospital as a result of a serious allergic reaction. She was shaken by the situation, particularly when the police arrived to speak with her. She never gave me milk again after that. She sobbed when my dad yelled at her as well. My recuperation was filled with conversation as my grandparents hurried to the hospital to be with me. My parents' attitude toward me changed after this episode. In the evenings, my dad would spend time with me and put me to bed, and my mother began getting me up for school and helping me get ready. They started treating me like a human being. I'm not sure what happened. Seeing my dad invite me to watch football games with him or my mom inquire about school was odd but enjoyable. I started to know my parents better in this way. Since I didn't harbor any animosity toward them, I believe I was born with a great deal of empathy. One of my favorite memories of the three of us is going to the beach on the weekends. My parents began to show me some love and I stopped feeling envious of the children in my class. My mom's mother, my grandma, taught me how to crochet, and when I became 15, I realized I had a knack for it. By this point, my grandfather was dead, and my grandma made a few $100s a year selling her lovely handmade crocheted items at the local craft market. I was captivated by the elaborate designs and vivid hues she employed, and I eagerly took in every aspect of her work. I developed a strong desire for making one-of-a-kind and customized goods as I spent more time developing my crocheting abilities under her tutelage. I made the decision to attempt selling my own crocheted goods after being inspired by my grandmother's attitude of entrepreneurship. At the same neighborhood craft market where she displayed her artwork, I set up a tiny stand with her encouragement. The enormous amount of feedback made me understand that I could make money from my interest. As soon as the word got out about my talent, students, acquaintances, and even locals began placing special orders. Customers were intrigued to the idea of owning something handmade and one of a kind, and each piece I created conveyed a story. My abilities and inventiveness expanded along with my modest business. In order to stretch the limits of conventional crochet, I started experimenting with other yarn textures, colors, and patterns. From basic blankets and scarves to elaborate wearables and home decor pieces, my creations have grown throughout time. My resolve to further hone my skill was strengthened by the encouraging comments and recurring business. My grandma advised me to open a savings account in order to better manage my money when I began to make a sizable income. She suggested that I put my salary aside for college. My parents were shocked to learn how much I had been making. And their eyes widened when I told them. They considered crocheting to be a pointless pastime till that point. They really objected when they saw that I was earning a substantial sum of money for my age. My mother forbade me from going to my grandmother's house, and my father threatened to burn all of my crocheted items, claiming he wasn't working hard to pay for my school so I could waste time on stupid things. When I told them that the money I had earned was with my grandma, they called her and began to shout at me. Despite my parents' insistence that they should have every penny, my grandma refused to give them anything when she discovered they were attempting to steal my money. This helped me realize that my parents were still as self-centered and self-serving as ever, despite the passage of time. I was determined not to lose the money that might be used to pay for my college education, and I couldn't give up my love of crocheting. My parents' actions made me question whether they would even pay for my college education, so I decided to take matters into my own hands. I made a plan to spend every weekend working on my designs at my grandmother's house. My best buddy, who was aware of the situation and encouraged me, was the one I lied to when I told my parents that I was staying at their house. We collaborated to complete the pouring orders from customers at my grandmother's residence. My grandmother was essential to the development of my company. In order to reach a wider audience, I also embraced online channels like Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Social media has become an effective tool for interacting with other artists and exhibiting my work. The digital world gave me countless opportunities to share my enthusiasm with people throughout the world. My little stand at the neighborhood craft show grew into a successful internet business over time. As a co-owner, my grandmother assisted me in opening a bank account with her. I had entire faith in her, and because of her, I was able to put all of my money aside for college. When my own parents merely wanted to keep my money for themselves, she had faith in me. My mother once looked through my phone without my knowledge and found out that I had an internet company. We got into a heated argument once she discovered that I was still running it behind their backs. My grandmother and I were both yelled at by my parents. They claimed to have raised and taken care of me all my life, and demanded that I take all of the money I had made and give it to them. I almost cried as I tried to clarify that I wasn't hurting anyone and that the money was for my college. My father shouted that he could no longer trust me since I had cheated on them. Standing behind me, my mother insisted that I remove my Instagram page. Instead, I shrewdly canceled my account, intending to restart it after I was no longer under parental control. Then, starting at 9 a.m., they imposed stringent phone limitations. Until 4 p.m. and 12 a.m. until 8 in the morning. Additionally, they began following my whereabouts and looking through my online history, sending me alerts if I looked up anything they thought was inappropriate. Even harmless things like buying underwear. My parents would phone me and my friends several times if I didn't return home right away after going out with them, something I was only permitted to do twice a week. They forbade me from crocheting with my grandmother, although occasionally I was permitted to spend a few hours with her after school. They threatened to disconnect my phone and internet if I didn't comply. Even though I was just 16 and had no means of escape, there were plenty of days when I just wanted to flee. My parents agreed to let me work part-time at a nearby cafe in exchange for a quarter of my profits. Without protest, I gave them their weekly allotment and sent my grandmother the remaining 75% to be deposited into my bank account. My parents persisted in making my life miserable by frequently entering my room at strange hours to check on me, reading through my emails and chats, and keeping tabs on where I was. I was grounded or made to give them a larger portion of my wages if I disobeyed their regulations. Knowing that getting into a reputable college was my ticket to leaving this existence behind, I concentrated on doing well in school in spite of everything. I put in a lot of work. I packed everything I had purchased for myself the night before my 17th birthday, leaving behind things my parents had given me, like my phone. To be sure they couldn't follow me or discover any details about my plans, I cleared my phone. I was finally able to move in with my grandmother when she came to take me up early in the morning. When my parents saw me go, they became irate and began fighting with my grandmother, threatening to call the police. Since I was now 17 and could make my own decisions, I told them to go ahead. They threatened to tell everyone that I was an unappreciative daughter in an attempt to blackmail me, but I didn't care. Additionally, they threatened to stop providing any financial aid for college, but I grinned since I knew I had saved enough money to qualify for a scholarship. I experienced a mixture of anxiety, relief, and resolve as I left the house. I had no idea that my path would soon take a surprising detour. It was refreshing to spend the first few weeks at my grandmother's house. Finally, the severe limitations were removed, and I was free to breathe without continual observation. I started by purchasing a new phone and obtaining a new number. After that, my grandmother and I went to the bank to change my minor account to an individual one. Being able to use my own card and account without anyone's consent made me very happy. I started crocheting again. Therefore, I revived my Instagram account. My grandmother was really encouraging and even offered me a tiny room in her home where I could erect a temporary studio. A week after I moved out, I received word from neighbors and family that my parents had celebrated their newfound freedom with a party. Being able to begin their new family life, without the burden of my presence, made them very pleased. They shared a ton of photos of themselves laughing and drinking all night long, and they invited their pals who didn't have kids. At first, the news was painful. Just 1 week after I left, my parents were celebrating my disappearance, which served as a clear reminder of how unwelcome I had been in their lives. When they learned about the event, my dad's parents were equally taken aback. They contacted right away to find out what had happened after they had my new number from one of my cousins. I was honest with them about my connection with my parents and the reasons behind my departure. When they heard about the abuse, they were appalled and questioned why I hadn't contacted them for assistance. I described how my grandparents and a select group of pals were the only people I could communicate with due to parental restrictions. At this point, my dad's parents disclosed that my parents had never desired me at all. After I moved in with them, they believed my parents had changed, but they were mistaken. They pleaded with me to pardon them for their lack of support. In order to defend me, they also talked to my grandmother, who told them about the numerous arguments she had with my parents. Following this, my dad's parents decided to tell everyone in the family about what my parents had done. As word got out among family members and acquaintances, individuals began contacting one another to offer their support. I was taken aback by their empathy for my situation. Some even offered financial assistance, but I turned them down and asked them to promote my crocheting business instead. This is how my company started to expand. I received full scholarship acceptance to my ideal college around this time. Finally, a positive change in my life was on the horizon. My grandma lived close to the college, so I could go see her every weekend to crochet or spend time with her. My dad's parents chose to give me their old vehicle as a gift. I was able to see my grandmother more easily because it only required minor repairs. A friend of mine who was employed at a local newspaper contacted me to inquire about writing a piece about me. Since there weren't many young company owners in our community, she believed that my narrative might encourage other young people to pursue their own goals. I gave it some thought and accepted the interview. I hope that if a child out there was trapped in a toxic atmosphere like I had been, they might read my tale and be inspired, but I didn't think it was a huge thing because I still had a lot of work to do on my business. It seemed odd to see my journey highlighted in the paper when the piece was published. Even though it was only a minor accomplishment, I felt proud of the effort I had put into my business in spite of all the challenges for the first time in a very long time. Other family members and friends began to contact me to congratulate me on my accomplishment, and my grandmother was quite proud of me. For me, this was a novel sensation. My parents never encouraged or acknowledged my diligence when I was growing up. My parents called my grandmother and yelled at her after reading the account. They demanded that I publicly give them credit for my business and accused me of betraying them by going behind their back. They had begun to receive criticism from relatives for their domineering actions. Additionally, they threatened to sue me and demanded that I give them a portion of my revenues. I started the business under my grandmother's roof, she told them forcefully, and she challenged them to try to take me to court, which they would undoubtedly lose. I wanted to yell at my parents because I was so upset over their actions, but I knew I couldn't. Instead, I invited my close friends and family to a little celebration that I had planned. Before I left for college, It was an opportunity to celebrate my business and hard work with people who truly loved me. A time I thought I earned. We had an amazing time. Naturally, my folks heard about it and managed to obtain my new phone number. They began emailing me, saying they wished they had never had me and labeling me an ungrateful daughter. My dad even sent me a lengthy text saying that I was squandering money celebrating with other people while he had spent his entire life supporting me. When my parents celebrated after I moved out, was it inappropriate of me to have a party to celebrate with my loved ones? Update 1. I had no idea my tale would become viral when I uploaded it to Reddit. I noticed that my narrative was making the rounds on TikTok in a matter of days. I'm afraid my parents might learn about this. Please pray they don't for me. Many of you have recommended that I permanently block my parents, and I intend to do just that. To let them know how their actions have impacted me, I would like to write them one last email. Despite what some of you have said, I am not a doormat. Since I'm still a young person and my parents are really toxic, it's challenging to cut them off entirely. No one prepares you for what to do when you have toxic parents and need to break off relationships with them, despite society's insistence that parents always want the best for us. I know some of you think I'm to fault for allowing my parents to take advantage of me, but keep in mind that I'm still a young person learning how to advocate for myself. Update 2. We appreciate everyone who got in touch with encouraging words and shared similar experiences. As I previously stated, with my grandmother's assistance, I composed an email to my parents. The email's contents are as follows. Dear parents, I've given our relationship a lot of thought, considering its past, present, and possible future. I regretfully recognize that, in order to further my personal development and well-being, I must cut off any contact with you too. I longed for your love during my early years and tried my hardest to live up to your standards, but I was never good enough. I have made several attempts over the years to gain acceptance in your life and to understand why you seem to despise me, but I have never been accepted. From my first recollections, when Mom made me drink milk in spite of my allergies, to feeling alienated in my own house, your behavior influenced how poisonous our family is. Nevertheless, I continued to aspire for a connection that never materialized. With Grandma's help, I discovered a sense of purpose and comfort in crocheting, which I believed could help us connect. But as I developed my company, your attempts to manipulate and discredit me have just strengthened my resolve to leave this poisonous atmosphere. Your attempts to control my festivities, threaten legal action, and insist on taking a piece of my hard-earned money just serve to further expose how toxic you are to me. I want you to know that this choice is not meant to be hurtful or retaliatory. It is a manifestation of self-preservation, a start toward creating a life devoid of poison and full of the affection and assistance that each and every child is entitled to. I don't mean any disrespect to any of you, but I must put my mental and emotional health first. I appreciate you encouraging me to be self-sufficient and undervaluing my abilities. I hope you both find happiness without me and wish you luck in your future pursuits. I ask that you honor my choice to stop communicating. Let's have a friendly separation. I'll admit that while I was composing this email to my parents, I started crying. It's really difficult to cut off your parents, even though I know I should be tough and keep in mind all the horrible things they have done to me. We are conditioned to adore them as children, and it might be challenging to overcome that mentality. I blacklisted them everywhere after I sent the email. I'm going to college in a few days and I'm a little anxious about it. My dad's parents and my grandmother will assist me in relocating to my new dorm. Meeting new people and forming friendships excites me. To everyone inquiring, even if I'm a college student, I won't give up on my successful crocheting business. My passion is creating original designs. I'll put in a lot of effort to balance it with my studies. As of right now, this is the only update I have. Update 3. My previous update was 6 months ago. Whoa. I'm amazed at how much time has gone by and how my life has changed. Above all, I am doing really well in college. Even though the classes are difficult, I'm working hard to keep my GPA high. Even though my crocheting business is doing well, I am aware that a college degree will serve as a safety net. In college, I've also made some amazing friends, and I even receive more crochet orders as a result of them. I've been able to meet new individuals and discover new vistas thanks to college. Compared to the loneliness I experienced at home, this is a welcome change. I even currently date a man named Kyle. We have only been dating for 2 months and we are still getting to know one another. We'll see how things work out because he's a nice man. I make it a point to go see my grandmother every weekend. We are still working from her temporary workspace to complete our crochet orders. The company is flourishing, and our clients' enthusiastic feedback is tremendous. Following my passion has given me a sense of fulfillment and purpose in addition to financial stability. It's been a quiet 6 months since my sincere email to my folks. They haven't tried to get in touch with me. According to my grandparents, my parents sold everything and left the nation in search of a new beginning since they felt that everyone was criticizing them. I have no idea where they are, and to be honest, I don't give a damn. It says volumes that they decided to go without making an effort to make amends or even offering an apology. Wherever they have gone, I sincerely hope they find happiness and are able to follow their lifelong dreams. It's time for me to concentrate on my personal path and on creating the life I've always desired. I would like to thank everyone who has been following my story and providing supportive comments. I am so grateful for your support. If all of this has taught me anything, it's how important it is to surround yourself with positive, self-affirming people. I am where I am now because of my grandmother and others who had faith in me. Most likely, this will be my final update. Thanks to everybody. My dad refused to spend Christmas with my bill, and now my mum is blaming my wife for everything. What should I do? Original post. This is a throwaway account as I have work colleagues on my mind that I don't want to know about my family drama, and spelling will be rubbish as I'm fuming right now. Obligatory names have been changed. So for the backstory, I 36F and married to the love of my life 36FK. We met when we were 17, she was out and proud whilst I was still in the closet, so we didn't start dating until I came out at 21. We got married in 2019 and have an adopted 4-year-old son Jack. This comes in relevant in a minute. My sister 27F Sarah has a long-term boyfriend 28M Steve who the family cannot stand. They've been together for 8 years and the whole family has hated him from the first time we met him. He is rude, obnoxious, arrogant and all in all a crappy human being. He's also someone that likes to claim that he is just honest, but if someone is honest back to him he flips out and sulks like a toddler. In fact, my toddler is better behaved than him. He isn't abusive to Sarah and doesn't direct these comments towards her, it's just the rest of us. He's actually a good partner to her and treats her well, which is his one redeeming quality. My dad and Kay hate him the most and will do anything to avoid him at family gatherings. Kay usually just ignores him and brushes off anything he says to her as she doesn't like conflict. However, there have been a few occasions that she has said something back, but it's usually said in a joking manner which amuses my dad to no end. My mum is a peacekeeper and will do anything to avoid drama, so she just changes the topic whenever he starts, but she and my grandparents all hate him just as much as the rest of us. Sarah is the only one that obviously doesn't hate him. Our son's birth mother Tess was Kay's best friend, who sadly died in 2021. This was a real shock as she had an underlying heart condition that she didn't know about and simply went to sleep one night and never woke up. Jack had been left alone in his cot all day screaming for his mum before Kay got worried that Tess wasn't answering her texts and went to their house to see if she was okay. She found Jack in his cot and Tess in her bed. We adopted Jack as no one in Tess's family was in a position to take him in. We raise him as our own, but he knows who Tess is. Obviously this is a very sensitive topic for Kay as it was so traumatic for her and Jack. Now, on to what happened last weekend. It was the anniversary of Tess's death on Saturday, so Kay, Jack and I went to visit her grave. Kay is always quiet after going to see her, and this time of year is especially hard for her. On Sunday we had a family gathering at my parents' house. These happen every couple of months as just a catch-up for everyone. At first nothing was out of the ordinary. Kay and my dad were off to the side talking as usual, only I could see that Kay was obviously struggling, so my dad and her went for a walk so she could clear her head. This is something they have done before, so nothing too unusual. However, Steve had an issue with this and asked why they had left and why he wasn't invited to walk with them. I explained that Tess and Kay just needed a minute. This wasn't good enough for Steve though, and he said she should have gotten over it by now. At this my granddad, who is naturally a very quiet guy, said that his best friend had died over 20 years ago and he still had days where he missed him so much it hurt. You don't just get over something like that. Steve shut at that. Kay and my dad got back and she was in a much better mood. We all sat down at the table for our late lunch and started chatting. Everything was fine at first until Steve started trying to butt into Kay's conversation with my granddad. When it was obvious that they weren't going to include him, he very loudly stated, "This is bullshit. She's getting all the attention of everyone because her friend died 3 fucking years ago. Get over it for fuck's sake, we're all sick of hearing about it." The whole table went silent and I took one look at Kay and knew she was about to go off on Steve. Only it didn't happen the way I thought. Rather than exploding at him, she looked at him very calmly and said that her and Granddad weren't talking about Tess. They were making plans to take him to the Christmas markets, but if he wants to be a dick then no problem. She then went on to say to him that everyone in the family hates him because he's a toxic narcissistic fuckwad. That whenever he can't come to a family gathering the whole family is much happier. That there is a reason he has no friends and that his own family can't stand to be around him. That reason is that he's rotten from the inside out and that Tess may have only been on this planet for 32 years, but she made a bigger impact on people that he would have if he lived until he was 150. That her funeral was rammed with people because she was so loved, whereas he'd be lucky if anyone other than Sarah was at his. After that, she got up and went to the back garden and I followed her. A few minutes later my dad came out and said that he'd told Sarah and Steve to leave. We went back inside and Kay apologized to everyone and said she should have just kept her mouth shut. Everyone other than my mum told her what she had done was right and it was about time someone told him. My dad then found it hilarious that a lesbian had been the one to tell him straight, which lightened the mood a lot. We spent the rest of the afternoon there before going to pick Jack up from Kay's mum's house as she had him overnight on Saturday for us. The reason I'm making this post is that yesterday I got a call from Sarah saying that she and Steve wanted an apology from Kay or they weren't going to Christmas. When I reminded her that we wouldn't be at Christmas either as it is our year to spend it with Kay's mum so it made no difference to us, she got really upset saying that she wanted an apology because Kay was way out of line. I said she wasn't and that I wouldn't even contemplate asking her to apologize because I agreed with everything she said and so did everyone else there. She ended the call and I just went back to work. Then today my dad called me and asked if Kay's mum would mind a few more for Christmas as he was refusing to spend it with Steve so he and my granddad needed someone else to go. Apparently after Sarah had called me she called mum and started ranting and my mum had told my dad to get Kay to apologize, which he said no to and they had an argument and my dad has now decided that he's done with Steve even if that affects his relationship with Sarah. He's not having it anymore. My mum wants Sarah there, and she won't go without Steve so my dad is going somewhere else and my granddad agreed with him. I texted Kay's mum and she said they were welcome so now my mum is furious and saying that my dad and Kay are ripping the family apart. So basically this has turned into a shit show. Kay has said she will apologize if I want her to, just to keep the peace but I've told her no way. Everything she said was true. I just don't know where to go from here and the people in my life all hate Steve so much that Kay could have physically attacked him and they would all still think she is in the right. So that's why I'm asking internet strangers who might have had to deal with difficult family members. What can we do to get into a place where we can be around each other amicably? I'm struggling to see a way right now. Wow, didn't realize how long this got until I went to post it. Sorry about that. Some of OOP's comments. Commenter. For things to be peaceful, both parties need to want it. Kay did nothing wrong, I wouldn't ever spend another moment with Steve. I would let Sarah know I love her and will see her anytime, anywhere but I'll never see Steve again. If you have one guest that basically wants to shit on the holiday table, there's no path forward with them. OOP. If it was just Sarah upset, then I wouldn't care, but it's my mum. She tries so hard to keep the whole family together and she is devastated by what's going on. If it wasn't for her, then Sarah could go take a running jump for all I care right now. Sarah. This is the issue that Steve and Sarah don't see anything wrong in what he's done. It was just him being honest. I would be happier for her to apologize if Steve and Sarah admitted that what he said was in the wrong as well. Without that, I'm being stubborn about it. My dad told Kay he will fall out with her if she apologizes as she did nothing wrong. There was no screaming or shouting, she said it very calmly. I feel like I'm stuck between making my mum happy and doing what I believe to be right. To another commenter. My sister doesn't see anything wrong in what he says as he's just being honest, but loses it when someone is honest back. I don't understand her anymore. Mom. Taking the high road and rising above it have been two of my mum's favorite things to say to us over the years. I just feel like enough is enough. He crossed a line this time that he can't come back from. I especially don't want my son around him when he's saying things like that about Tess. To another commenter. If I hear my mum say take the high road one more time I'm gonna scream. I'm sick of the high road, I've been on it for 8 years. I'm happy on the low road now. Later that day, OOP, well I've just found out that my granny and pa, my mum's parents, are going to my uncle's for Christmas and Steve is not invited, so it looks like it's going to be just Mum, Sarah and Steve for Christmas this year. How OP feels about that? Vindicated as my mum is like her parents, they're all peacekeepers and if ever they have had enough then it just shows that he's not just stepped over the line, he's ran right past it. Mom. Kay's mum has already told her that if she changes her mind, then she is welcome at her house. Even if it's Christmas morning, she is more than welcome. Obviously Steve and Sarah aren't invited at all, but it's good that my mum has the option at least. Later reflection. I have realized that he has been trying to target Kay and my dad's relationship as they're very close. They have traveled all over the country visiting class car shows together which Steve has tried to get in on, but he doesn't know anything about cars so there's no point in him going even if they did like him. I actually think he's been trying to push Kay and I out of the family so that he gets my dad to himself, even though my dad can't stand him. Update post. Hi, I know how much this community loves an update, so I thought I would give you one as things seem to be sorting themselves out, kind of. After I wrote my last post, a few things happened in the next couple of hours. First thing was that I spoke to my grandparents on my mom's side. They were there when this all happened, but they're like my mom and just constantly try to keep the peace. That's where she gets it from. They were supposed to be spending Christmas with my mom this year but had changed their minds and decided to spend it with my uncle instead. They have made the decision to not be around Steve either as he causes too much drama. They asked if they could come and see us and Jack on the 23rd before they head off to my uncle's, which I happily agreed to. This really surprised me and it outright shocked my mom, as like I said they are the biggest take the high road type people I've ever met, but even they'd had enough. The next thing that happened was my dad called to let me know that Steve and Sarah had now decided that they want Kay to make a public apology in front of the whole family and admit she was lying and that the family loves Steve. He was laughing as he told me this and called them delusional, so any small chance of a superficial apology went out the window. The third thing that happened was Jack getting home from the after-school club with a recorder that I'm sorely tempted to shove up the teacher's backside. So all in all it wasn't a great day. Through talking to people on here, I also realized that Steve has been trying to push Kay and I out of the family. Organizing trips that he knows we would be able to go on. We wouldn't have gone on them anyway as a weekend away with him sounds worse than a paper cut to the eyeball, and him constantly trying to get my dad away from Kay whenever we are all together. I think this is because he is jealous of Kay and Dad's relationship as they're very close and go on trips to classic car shows several times a year together, usually with my granddad as well. Anyway, things went quiet for a few days until the weekend. Our town has a big Christmas fair that runs from November through December and we always go to it with Mum, Dad, Granddad, and Kay's mom. We decided to cheer my mum up a bit to go on Sunday and then out for dinner after. My mum was told that if Sarah or Steve showed up then we would all leave and she promised they wouldn't be there. Things were a bit awkward at first, but settled after a while. At one point Jack got my mum and dad to take him on the giant snow slide and as my mum walked back over to us she had tears in her eyes. I pulled her to one side to see what was going on and she said that whilst waiting in line, Jack had said he was happy Uncle Steve wasn't here. When my mum asked why, he said that Uncle Steve was a bad man. My mum tried to say that he wasn't, but in typical stubborn 4-year-old fashion, he had argued and said he learned in school that people who say mean things all the time are bad people and Uncle Steve said mean things all the time so he was a bad man and that he didn't like him. There had been a case of bullying in his class a few weeks ago and the teacher had done a lesson on how wrong bullying is, so I think that's where this came from. This finally broke through to my mum. If even a 4-year-old can see what a horrible prick the man is then she had too as well. She said that she felt stuck because she hated Steve and agreed with everything that Kay has said but she loves Sarah and doesn't want to isolate her. I told her I would always be there for her, but I wasn't putting myself, Jack or Kay through being around Steve again and she needed to think about what she wants. Not what I want or Dad or Kay or Jack or her parents or Sarah or Steve, but what she wants. She went quiet and then said that Kay's mum had told her she was welcome at hers for Christmas if she wanted to and that she could decide on Christmas Day if she wanted. Kay's mum would save her a plate. We went back to the group and a little while later I saw Mum and Kay's mum having a deep discussion whilst walking behind us. Neither will say what they talked about, but Mum seemed a bit happier after their talk. They have also been talking since, as yesterday my mum told me that she will be coming to Kay's mum's for Christmas and they've been talking about going shopping together next week. When Mum told Sarah after calling me, Sarah predictably lost her mind and said that Mum was choosing us over her. My mum told her she was choosing to have a good Christmas rather than being belittled and made miserable all for the sake of Steve and his so-called honesty. Sarah then called me and asked if I was happy that I'd won. She then did the unforgivable and used a few homophobic slurs towards me and Kay and called Jack the bastard of a whore. I ended the call, blocked her everywhere and then let my family know what had happened and that I never wanted to speak to her again. They're all as appalled as I am and my granny, Mum's mum, called Sarah and apparently told her she was dead to her as she won't have a bigot in the family. Sarah has been trying to reach out to apologize because she knows she has stepped over the unforgivable line, but I've just kept blocking the fake accounts that she's making on IG. Steve tried reaching out to my dad after this and when he eventually answered Steve tried to say that Sarah was just angry and didn't mean it. According to Mum, Dad ended up giving him a verbal lashing and told him that he was the worst thing that had ever happened to Sarah and our family. My dad has told Sarah he is disgusted with her, but will be there for her if she leaves Steve. Until then, good luck. Mum has gone low contact as well, but wants to keep the door open so that Sarah is not completely isolated. I had a few people saying that Steve may be abusive towards Sarah, but I really don't think he is. He usually acts like a dick when the attention isn't on him. He knows that when he says dickish things then all the attention is on him and he revels in it. After Sarah's outburst, I just think that they're both toxic and feed off each other's toxicity. She lets him get away with the things he says because she gets pleasure out of watching us all bite our tongues and keep quiet. So, Mom's angry, Dad's angry, our 3 grandparents are angry, extended family are angry and Kay is being my rock, but I can tell she's really angry about what she said towards Jack. I'm just sad and done with it all. At least now I know what she really thinks about Jack, Kay and myself, so there's that. Not the perfect update, but we move on. It will be nice this Christmas to have both sides of the family together for the first time and not have to worry about Steve being a dick, but I'm sad that this is how my relationship with my sister has ended. I'm trying to get into the Christmas spirit but it's a tough one right now. The only things that make me smile are Kay and Jack being goofy idiots to cheer me up, however the recorder can go to hell. I curse whoever invented the thing, like seriously, fuck you. Thanks for all the support in my original post and opening my eyes to a few things. Maybe internet strangers are the way to go for advice after all. Hope you all have a good Christmas/holidays. Some of OOP's comments. Commenter, I don't think the dickish Bill and Sarah saga had concluded. I'm glad you'll have a peaceful Christmas in theory. I just think the pair of them are not convinced yet that they're shut out. OOP. It wouldn't surprise me if they try and turn up to my parents for Christmas, but we won't be there so they won't get far. As long as they stay away from me, Kay and Jack, then I don't care what they do. Commenter, many small children playing recorders with more enthusiasm that skill follow Steve everywhere. OOP, this just made me laugh a little too hard. Thanks for that. Editor's note, wasn't sure whether to mark this one as concluded or ongoing. I've tentatively marked it as ongoing but I'm happy to change it.